Close your eyes for a moment and remember the last time fury coursed through your veins, yet you swallowed it whole. Perhaps your fists clenched beneath the table, your breathing grew shallow, or you found yourself staring into space while whispering, "I can't react, I'll just move on." But that burning sensation didn't simply evaporate, did it? Instead, it settled deep within your chest, creating a persistent hum of tension that followed you for days, weeks, or even months. This phenomenon represents one of humanity's most misunderstood emotional experiences, repressed anger. Unlike the explosive outbursts we typically associate with rage, this quiet fury operates in shadows, slowly rewiring our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships in ways we rarely recognize. It's the polite smile masking resentment, the chronic fatigue that appears without explanation, the sudden irritability over seemingly trivial matters. Recent psychological research reveals that approximately 35% of adults regularly suppress their anger rather than expressing it constructively. This isn't merely an inconvenience or character quirk. It's a complex psychological pattern that influences our mental health, physical well-being, and capacity for authentic relationships. Yet, understanding why we do this, and what happens when anger remains trapped within us, opens doorways to profound personal transformation. Anger, at its essence, functions as an internal alarm system. It alerts us when our values are being violated, our boundaries crossed, or our fundamental needs ignored. This emotion carries critical information about our environment and our place within it. When we experience anger, our psyche is essentially communicating something important is being threatened, dismissed, or compromised. However, when we habitually suppress this signal, we create a profound disconnection from our own emotional intelligence. We're essentially telling ourselves, "These feelings are unacceptable. I will bury them and pretend they don't exist." Yet emotions, particularly ones as energetically powerful as anger, don't simply vanish when ignored. Instead, they undergo a complex transformation, continuing to influence our thoughts, decisions, and behaviors from beneath conscious awareness. What makes repressed anger particularly insidious is its ability to masquerade as other emotions. You might interpret persistent feelings of sadness, anxiety, or guilt as separate issues, when underneath lies months or years of unexpressed rage. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as emotional displacement, the unconscious process by which powerful feelings transform into more socially acceptable forms. Consider how this might manifest in daily life. The chronic pessimism that colors every interaction, the passive-aggressive comments that slip out during conversations, the inexplicable exhaustion after social gatherings, or the tendency to ruminate endlessly over minor slights. These patterns often trace back to anger that has been consistently denied expression. The frustration-aggression hypothesis, first proposed by psychologist John in 1939, suggests that blocked goals naturally generate aggressive impulses. When we cannot achieve what we desire or need, anger arises as a motivational force designed to help us overcome obstacles. However, in complex social environments, direct expression of this anger often feels impossible or dangerous. Think of anger as water heating in a sealed container. Without proper release mechanisms, pressure builds until something gives way. Sometimes this manifests as small, barely noticeable releases, a sarcastic comment, an eye roll, or unexplained moodiness. Other times, the pressure erupts suddenly and disproportionately, surprising both ourselves and those around us with its intensity. But there's an even more subtle dynamic at play. When anger is chronically suppressed, it begins to alter our fundamental relationship with our own needs and desires. We start questioning whether our feelings are legitimate, whether we're being too sensitive, or whether we have any right to feel frustrated at all. This internal dialogue gradually erodes self-trust and self-advocacy, leaving us feeling powerless in situations where we once might have stood up for ourselves. Why do we choose suppression over expression? The answer often lies in our earliest experiences with anger. Many people grow up in environments where expressing frustration or rage is met with punishment, rejection, or overwhelming guilt. Perhaps you heard messages like "good children don't get angry," or "your anger hurts other people," or witnessed loved ones struggling with explosive tempers that cause real harm. In response to these experiences, the developing psyche makes a logical adaptation. Anger equals danger, so anger must be hidden. This strategy often works well in childhood, allowing us to maintain relationships and avoid conflict. However, what serves as protection in youth can become a prison in adulthood. The paradox is that suppressing anger doesn't actually create the safety we seek. Research consistently demonstrates that chronic anger suppression correlates with higher rates of anxiety, depression, cardiovascular problems, and compromised immune function. The energy of anger, when denied outward expression, turns inward, creating a state of chronic physiological and psychological stress. Moreover, suppressed anger doesn't remain private. It leaks out through our body language, tone of voice, and energetic presence, often creating the very interpersonal tension we hope to avoid. Others sense our hidden resentment, even when we believe we're successfully concealing it. Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist, described repressed emotions as forming what he called the shadow, aspects of ourselves that exist outside conscious awareness, yet profoundly influence our behavior. This shadow isn't inherently destructive. It's simply unintegrated energy that operates according to its own logic and agenda. Your repressed anger forms part of this shadow, carrying information about boundaries you've never established, needs you've never acknowledged, and experiences you've never fully processed. Each instance of suppressed rage becomes like a brick in an invisible wall between your authentic self and the world around you. Over time, this wall grows higher and more impenetrable, creating a sense of isolation and disconnection that can feel inexplicable. However, Jung also taught that shadow work, the process of recognizing and integrating these hidden aspects, represents one of the most powerful paths towards psychological wholeness. When we begin to acknowledge our repressed anger consciously, it loses its unconscious power over us. Instead of being driven by hidden resentments, we can make conscious choices about how to respond to frustrating situations. Interestingly, many people who struggle with repressed anger are highly empathetic individuals. They possess an acute sensitivity to others' emotions, and often prioritize harmony and peace over their own needs. While this capacity for empathy represents a genuine strength, it can also become a mechanism for self-abandonment. Empathic individuals often fall into what psychologists call emotional overextension, constantly attuning to others' feelings while neglecting their own. They become skilled at reading rooms, managing others' moods, and avoiding conflict at all costs. However, this hypervigilance toward external emotional states can create a profound disconnection from their own inner experience. The result is a person who appears calm, agreeable, and emotionally stable on the surface, while harboring years of unexpressed frustration underneath. Their anger becomes invisible, not only to others but often to themselves, manifesting instead as chronic fatigue, physical tension, or a vague sense that something is perpetually off in their lives. The human body is not designed to contain intense emotions indefinitely. When anger is consistently suppressed, it creates measurable changes in our physiology. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline remain elevated, creating a state of chronic arousal that the nervous system interprets as ongoing threat. Research has linked habitual anger suppression to numerous physical health problems, including hypertension, cardiovascular disease, compromised immune function, and chronic pain conditions. The body, in essence, begins to attack itself when emotional energy has no healthy outlet for expression. But the psychological implications are equally profound. Suppressed anger impairs decision-making abilities, reduces emotional resilience, and makes it difficult to establish and maintain healthy boundaries in relationships. We may find ourselves saying yes when we mean no, tolerating treatment we know is unacceptable, or feeling perpetually drained after social interactions. Perhaps the most transformative understanding about repressed anger is that it contains valuable information about our lives. Each instance of suppressed rage points towards something significant, a value that's being violated, a need that's going unmet, or a boundary that requires establishment. Rather than viewing anger as an enemy to be conquered, we can begin to see it as a diagnostic tool. The person who consistently feels irritated during team meetings might be experiencing a lack of recognition or voice in decision-making. Someone who feels inexplicably angry after visiting certain family members might be struggling with old patterns of being dismissed or controlled. When we approach our anger with curiosity rather than judgment, it becomes a pathway to greater self-understanding. We can ask ourselves, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What situation or dynamic is creating this response? What would I need to feel respected and heard in this context? The process of integrating repressed anger doesn't require dramatic confrontations or explosive outbursts. Instead, it begins with simple acknowledgement, the willingness to notice and name what we're actually feeling without immediately pushing it away. This might look like pausing when irritation arises and asking yourself, what's really happening here? What need of mine is being ignored or dismissed? Sometimes the answer is surprisingly simple. You might realize you're hungry, tired, or simply need 5 minutes of quiet. Other times the answer reveals deeper patterns about how you allow others to treat you or how you've learned to abandon your own needs. Journaling can be particularly powerful for this work. Writing freely about frustrations without censoring or editing allows suppressed emotions to find expression in a safe, private space. Many people discover that once they begin acknowledging their anger on paper, it loses much of its unconscious power and becomes more manageable. As we become more comfortable acknowledging our anger, we can begin experimenting with healthy expression. This doesn't mean becoming aggressive or hurtful. Rather, it means finding ways to communicate our needs and boundaries clearly and directly. For some, this might involve having gentle but honest conversations about relationship dynamics that feel unbalanced. For others, it might mean making different choices about how they spend their time and energy. The key is moving from unconscious suppression to conscious choice. Interestingly, people who learn to express anger constructively often find that their capacity for empathy actually increases. When we honor our own emotional experience, we become more attuned to the full spectrum of human feeling, both in ourselves and others. We develop what might be called emotional literacy, the ability to recognize, understand, and communicate about feelings without drama or destruction. The benefits of integrating repressed anger extend far beyond personal emotional health. When we stop carrying hidden resentments, our relationships become more authentic and satisfying. Others no longer have to navigate around our unspoken tensions or guess at our unmet needs. Our decision-making improves because we're no longer unconsciously driven by buried frustrations. We can assess situations more clearly and respond from a place of conscious choice rather than reactive suppression. Even our creativity and vitality can increase. The energy that was once tied up in containing anger becomes available for more life-affirming pursuits. Many people report feeling more alive, more present, and more genuinely themselves as they learn to honor the full spectrum of their emotional experience. On a deeper level, learning to work with repressed anger involves confronting fundamental questions about authenticity, self-worth, and our right to exist fully in the world. When we consistently suppress our emotional responses, we're essentially telling ourselves that our inner experience doesn't matter, that keeping others comfortable is more important than honoring our own truth. Integrating anger requires us to claim our own significance, to assert that our feelings, needs, and boundaries deserve respect, including from ourselves. This can feel revolutionary for people who have spent years minimizing their own experience in service of maintaining harmony. Quote. So, also a spiritual dimension to this work. Many wisdom traditions speak of the importance of becoming whole, of integrating all aspects of ourselves rather than rejecting the parts that feel uncomfortable or socially unacceptable. In this context, anger becomes not an obstacle to spiritual growth, but a necessary component of it. Developing a healthy relationship with anger is an ongoing practice rather than a one-time achievement. It requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to stay curious about our emotional responses rather than immediately judging or suppressing them. One powerful practice involves what might be called anger meditation, taking time to sit quietly with feelings of frustration or irritation, without trying to fix, change, or eliminate them. Simply witnessing these emotions with friendly awareness can begin to transform our relationship to them. Another helpful approach is developing what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between different shades and intensities of feeling. Instead of just angry, we might recognize annoyance, frustration, indignation, rage, or righteous anger. This precision helps us respond more appropriately to different situations. It's worth noting that the tendency to suppress anger isn't merely individual. It's often cultural and generational. Many societies have complex contradictory messages about anger, particularly for certain groups. Women, for instance, often receive strong messages that anger is unfeminine or unattractive, while men may be taught that any emotion other than anger is weakness. Understanding these broader patterns can help us approach our own suppression with greater compassion. We're not failing at emotional regulation. We're responding to complex social conditioning that may no longer serve us. The journey of integrating repressed anger is ultimately about reclaiming our full humanity. It's about refusing to live as a fraction of ourselves, and instead embracing the rich, complex, sometimes challenging reality of our inner experience. This doesn't mean becoming selfish, aggressive, or difficult. Instead, it means developing the courage to be authentic, the wisdom to express ourselves constructively, and the compassion to honor both our own needs and those of others. As we learn to work with anger consciously, we often discover that it was never really the enemy we thought it was. Instead, it was a messenger, a guardian, a part of ourselves that was trying to protect something valuable. When we finally listen to its message, both the anger and what it was protecting can find peace. The hidden fire of repressed anger, when finally acknowledged and honored, becomes not a source of destruction, but a wellspring of vitality, authenticity, and deep self-respect. In learning to tend this fire consciously, we reclaim not only our emotional freedom, but our capacity to live fully engaged with ourselves and the world around us. This is the true gift of understanding repressed anger, not the elimination of this powerful emotion, but the integration of it into a more complete, more honest, and ultimately more peaceful way of being human.